bill to create a Canada Disability Benefit has returned to the House, but with Senate amendments. And a group of senators want the government to make sure Bill C-22 gets passed before MPs leave for the summer. Kim Pate is one of those senators, a member of the Independent Senators Group. Senator, good to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you, too.
So I want to talk about the bill. The Senate did pass Bill C-22 more than 3 weeks ago with a number of amendments. You and your colleagues, several of you say it's now urgent to get this bill through to royal assent and in place as soon as possible. Why is that?
Well, because people with disabilities are waiting for this benefit, and the bill is really just a framework to get the benefit developed and to then work with people with disabilities to develop it. So the government introduced this idea more than 2 years ago. We took about 3 months to study it, to improve it, and send it back. And the longer it sits in the House, the longer it takes for us to actually move to the next stage. And so we think the Senate amendments are vital to it, and I think most people with disabilities would agree. And
I'll ask you about those amendments in just a moment. But first, to put it into perspective, what is the gap right now for low-income Canadians who face disabilities in terms of the benefit process? How many people are we talking about when we think of who could benefit from this once it's passed?
Well, we're talking about thousands of people, absolutely, and probably much closer to 1 million people. Because right now, people who have disabilities, if they either qualify for benefits from insurance companies if they're on leave because of something that happened while they were working, or they're on things like here in Ontario disability benefit, so a social assistance type of benefit. None of them are adequate to meet people's basic needs. And so we're talking about resources that would be made available that would top up people's income and lift them out of poverty. Because the majority of people on disability are living in poverty, and I think that's atrocious. And so really that's what the government was recognizing. I think it's laudable that the government introduced the bill. Now, with the Senate amendments, we have the option of actually seeing it do exactly what they propose.
So let's talk about that then. You are asking the government to look at a handful of key changes. I know there's one section about clawbacks. There's talk about the time frame of getting this into place, who's eligible, how that's calculated. Can you take us through what those key changes are?
Sure. So one of the main changes is to make sure that there's adequate income. And so talking about using the poverty line and actually measuring and bringing people up to an adequate source. There's also a provision to basically say that there shouldn't be clawbacks. How do we know there will be clawbacks if that isn't in there? Because we saw what happened with the Canada Emergency Benefit. And when it was put in place, insurance companies and provinces and territories, not all, but many, clawed back the resources. So people were paid the money, the CERB, and then had that money taken off their checks. And so many people, in fact, were disqualified completely from their disability benefits as well. So it was a double whammy, and so we don't want to see that repeat. This is not supposed to be a windfall for provinces or insurance companies. It's supposed to be lifting people out of poverty. And so inadvertently, without that kind of amendment, we could end up with people being in the same situation. There's also an appeal process been introduced, which is important if people are deemed not to qualify, then to at least have a process whereby they can appeal that and try and have brought in. And then the final one is to have everything start within 12 months of royal assent.
Now, I know the Minister for Disability Inclusion, Carla Qualtrough, has said that the government is reviewing the amendments. This was 2 weeks ago. She said that the government is committed to the timeline, committed to getting royal assent by the end of June. Do you have any more specifics on whether the government is going to accept these amendments in this current form when the bill comes back?
We don't know. We do know that at the time that we were presenting the amendments, concerns were raised by the government representative as well as the sponsor about the constitutionality of, for instance, the clawback provision. Our response is we also have a constitutional responsibility. So that has to do with the division of powers and the power to regulate in terms of insurance companies. As one of our colleagues pointed out, these kinds of measures have been put in place before and have not been ruled unconstitutional. And really, in this case, we also have a responsibility to people with with disabilities. And the Senate especially has that responsibility, as part of our role is to represent regional interests, but also the interests of those who are otherwise considered minority interests, or as many young people say to me, intentionally ignored folks, and that would be people with disabilities. And the government has a choice to make. Will they fall on the side of ensuring that people with disabilities have the benefits, or will they fall on the side of shoring up insurance companies? And really, it's that basic, because if in fact they don't pass that amendment, what it means is that disability groups, individuals, will have to go to court to argue this, probably if and when insurance companies claw back, or if provinces do. And we know how long that takes. One of the witnesses who testified before the Senate committee on this bill talked about a challenge that he and a group of others started 11 years ago, and it took that long to work through the court processes. I think there's an obligation on the part of the government to ensure that the disability benefit gets to the people who it's intended for and doesn't line the pockets of insurance companies or provinces.
Okay, we'll see how that debate unfolds. The government House Leader does say Bill C-22 is on this week's agenda for debate. Senator Kim Pate, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.